I, 57 feuds, never thought I'd be sharing my story on Reddit, but here I am, fingers trembling as I type. After over 30 years of what I thought was a solid marriage, my world has been turned upside down, and I desperately need to get this off my chest. My husband, 59M, and I met during our sophomore year of college. I can still remember the day. I was rushing to my economics class, arms full of books, when I collided with him outside the library. Our eyes met as we scrambled to pick up my scattered notes, and it was like a scene from a cheesy rom-com. We were young, in love, and full of dreams. After graduation, we got married in a small ceremony surrounded by our closest friends and family. I still have the photo from that day on my bedside table. We looked so happy, so full of hope for the future. I put my career aspirations on hold to support his burgeoning business career. At the time, it seemed like the right thing to do. He had such big dreams, and I believed in him completely. I thought we were building a life together, but now I realize I was just a supporting character in his story, a footnote in his grand narrative. The first few years were blissful. We worked hard, him at the office, me at home, and later with part-time jobs to supplement our income. We scrimped and saved, celebrated small victories, and comforted each other through setbacks. When our first child was born, I thought my heart would burst with happiness. My husband was so proud, showing off photos of our daughter to anyone who would look. But as his career took off, things began to change. The late nights at the office became more frequent. The mysterious business trips multiplied. I started noticing the scent of unfamiliar perfume on his shirts when I did the laundry. At first, I told myself it was all in my head. After all, a man approaching 60, with a successful career and a family, wouldn't be foolish enough to jeopardize it all for a fling, right? I ignored the signs for years, the hushed phone conversations that abruptly ended when I entered the room, the credit card statements with charges from jewelry stores and high-end restaurants on days he was supposedly working late, the way he'd become defensive and changed the subject whenever I asked about our finances. I made excuses for him, both to myself and to our friends. He's under a lot of stress at work, I'd say, or you know how demanding his job is. Looking back, I can see how I gradually lost myself in his shadow. My own dreams, of going back to school, of starting a small business, were always put on the back burner. Maybe next year became my mantra. I poured everything into being the perfect wife and mother, thinking that if I just tried hard enough, if I was just a little bit better, a little more understanding, things would go back to the way they were. But they never did. And last week, my husband finally shattered the illusion I'd been desperately clinging to. He sat me down at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared family meals, helped our kids with homework, and stayed up late talking about our hopes for the future. But this time, his eyes were cold, distant. He spoke the words I never thought I'd hear. I want a divorce. He said it so casually, as if he was discussing the weather, not demolishing the life we'd built together over 3 decades. I've tried to make it work, he continued, his voice devoid of emotion, but I can't overlook your dull personality and rigid habits anymore. I need to be free to live the life I want. I was stunned. Dull? Rigid? Was this how he saw me after all these years? The woman who had given up her dreams to support his. The mother of his children, the partner who had stood by him through thick and thin? I felt like I was having an out-of-body experience, watching this scene unfold from somewhere above. But he wasn't finished. He pulled out a stack of papers from his briefcase, divorce papers. They looked so official, so final. I need you to sign these, he said, sliding them across the table. His tone was businesslike, as if this was just another contract negotiation. You can stay in the house for a while longer, but I want you gone by the time I get back from my vacation. Vacation? I echoed, still trying to process everything. The word felt absurd in the context of this conversation. Who plans a vacation right after asking for a divorce? He nodded, and I saw a hint of excitement in his eyes that I hadn't seen in years. It was the look he used to get when we were planning our future together. Now, it was for a future that didn't include me. I'm going away with my girlfriend for a couple of weeks. When I return, I expect you to have signed the papers and moved out, girlfriend. The word hit me like a physical blow. So, the rumors were true. The whispers I'd heard at company parties, the pitying looks from our friends, they weren't just gossip. My husband, the man I'd loved for over 3 decades, had found someone else. Someone younger, I assumed. Someone more exciting. Someone who wasn't me. I don't remember much of what happened after that. I know I didn't cry. I was too shocked for tears. I just sat there, staring at the divorce papers, as my husband packed a bag and left for his romantic getaway with his new flame. The front door closed behind him with a finality that seemed to echo through the empty house. The next few days passed in a blur. I went through the motions of my daily routine, trying to find some semblance of normalcy in a world that had suddenly become unrecognizable. I made the bed in our room, his side still perfectly smooth, untouched. I cooked meals I couldn't eat, the silence of the empty dining room oppressive. I sat in my usual spot on the couch, the TV droning on unwatched, as I tried to make sense of how my life had imploded so suddenly. It was during one of these autopilot moments, while taking out the trash, that I found something that would change everything. Buried under a pile of junk mail and old newspapers was a sealed envelope from the IRS. My first instinct was to throw it away. It was probably just another tax form or notification. But something made me pause. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was a desperate need for any kind of distraction from my crumbling marriage. Whatever the reason, I opened it. The letter inside was addressed to my husband. As I read, my hands began to shake. The IRS had found significant discrepancies in his tax returns over the past several years. They were requesting that he appear before a judge with comprehensive documentation to support his reported income and deductions. If he failed to do so, he could face legal action for tax fraud. I read the letter 3 times, trying to make sense of it. Tax fraud? This couldn't be right. My husband was many things, a cheater, apparently, but a criminal? It seemed impossible. He had always been so meticulous about our finances, insisting on handling all the tax preparations himself. But then, I remembered the late-night phone calls he'd take in his study, speaking in hushed tones. The mysterious business trips to obscure locations that he'd never fully explain. The way he'd always change the subject when I asked about our investments or savings. Suddenly, it all made a terrible kind of sense. I knew I should probably just put the letter back where I found it and pretend I never saw it. After all, despite everything, he was still my husband. We had built a life together, raised children together. Did I really want to potentially send him to prison? But the thought of him lounging on a beach with his girlfriend while I sat here, shell-shocked and alone, made something snap inside me. The years of neglect, the lies, the casual cruelty of his departure, it all came crashing down on me at once. Before I could talk myself out of it, I was in his study. I'd never been allowed in here. It was his private space, off limits to the rest of the family. But now, fueled by a mixture of anger, betrayal, and burning curiosity, I started searching. I felt like a stranger in my own home, rifling through drawers and files, looking for, I wasn't even sure what. It didn't take long to find something. Hidden behind a false panel in his desk drawer was a small, leather-bound book. As I flipped through its pages, my heart sank. It was a detailed record of under-the-table deals, offshore accounts, and fake businesses set up to launder money. The entries went back years, predating even the birth of our first child. One entry caught my eye. Whale Watching Tours, LLC. I almost laughed out loud. My husband, who got seasick on our honeymoon cruise and refused to set foot on a boat ever since, running a whale-watching business, it was absurd. But as I read on, I realized it was brilliant in its simplicity. A cash-heavy business with flexible capacity and easy-to-fudge numbers, the perfect front for illegal activities. I sat there on the floor of his study, surrounded by the evidence of my husband's double life, feeling like I was starring in some bizarre crime drama. The man I thought I knew, the life I thought we shared, it had all been a lie. Every anniversary dinner, every family vacation, every proud moment watching our children graduate, all of it tainted by this secret he'd been keeping. As the reality of the situation sank in, I felt a strange calm settle over me. For years, I had been the dutiful wife, turning a blind eye to his indiscretions, making excuses for his absences, and sacrificing my own dreams for his. But no more. This was no longer about a cheating husband or a failed marriage. This was about justice. I carefully replaced everything as I had found it, my mind racing with possibilities. The letter from the IRS, the incriminating ledger, they were my ticket to freedom. But more than that, they were my chance to reclaim my life, to stop being a supporting character and become the protagonist of my own story. I knew what I had to do, but the thought terrified me. If I turned him in, there would be no going back. Our marriage would be over, yes, but so would the life I had known for the past 30 years. Could I really start over at my age? The thought of facing the world alone, of rebuilding my life from scratch, was daunting. But then I thought about my husband, probably sipping cocktails on a beach with his young girlfriend right now, smugly believing he had it all figured out. He thought he could discard me like yesterday's news, leave me with nothing while he sailed off into the sunset with his ill-gotten gains. Well, two could play at that game. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for the IRS tip line. As I waited for someone to answer, I felt a mix of emotions: fear, anger, sadness, but also, surprisingly, hope. For the first time in years, I felt like I was taking control of my own destiny. Internal Revenue Service Fraud Hotline, a voice answered. How may I assist you today? I took a deep breath. This was it. The point of no return. I thought about all the years I'd spent supporting my husband, believing in his dreams, making excuses for his behavior. I thought about the future I'd imagined for us, growing old together, enjoying our retirement, spoiling our grandchildren. That future was gone now, shattered by his betrayal. But maybe, just maybe, I could build a new future for myself. Hello, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I'd like to report a case of tax fraud. As I began to share the details of what I'd discovered, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. Yes, my marriage was over. Yes, the future was uncertain. But for the first time in decades, that future was mine to shape. I was no longer just a wife, a mother, a supportive partner. I was a woman reclaiming her power, her identity, her life. I don't know what will happen next. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. The road ahead is unclear and likely difficult. I'll have to face our children, explain to them why their father is in legal trouble. I'll have to navigate the complicated process of divorce, disentangling 3 decades of shared life. I'll have to figure out how to support myself, possibly re-enter the workforce after years of being a homemaker. But I do know that I'm done being the supporting character in someone else's story. It's time for me to write my own. So Reddit, that's where I stand. My husband will be back from his vacation in 2 weeks, expecting to find a signed divorce agreement and of vacant houses. Instead, he'll be walking into a storm of his own making. The life he so casually discarded, it's about to come crashing down around him. Am I wrong for doing this? Should I have confronted him first? Given him a chance to explain? Or am I justified in bringing his house of cards tumbling down? I've spent so long being the good wife that I'm not sure I trust my own judgment anymore. Part of me feels guilty. Despite everything, this is the man I've loved for most of my adult life, the father of my children. Am I betraying our family by turning him in? But then I remember his cold eyes as he handed me those divorce papers, the casual way he announced he was leaving me for his girlfriend. I think about all the lies, all the years of deception, and I know that the real betrayal was his, not mine. Whatever happens, I know one thing for certain. The woman my husband comes home to won't be the same one he left behind. Whether that's for better or worse remains to be seen. But for the first time in years, I'm looking forward to finding out who I can be on my own terms. Thank you for listening, Reddit. I never thought I'd be starting over at 57, but here I am. Scared, yes. Uncertain, definitely. But also, strangely exhilarated. Is this what it feels like to take control of your own life? I guess I'm about to find out. Update 1. It's been 4 months since my last post, and so much has happened. Thank you all for your support and advice during this challenging time. For those who need a refresher, my husband of 30+ years suddenly asked for a divorce, then left for a vacation with his girlfriend. While he was away, I discovered evidence of his long-term tax fraud. I was torn between confronting him and reporting him to the IRS. Well, I made my decision, and here's what happened. After I called the IRS tip line, things moved quickly. I provided them with the information I had found, including details about the fake whale-watching tours business my husband had been using to launder money. The IRS agents were professional and thorough, asking for any documentation I could provide safely. When my husband finally returned from his vacation, tanned and relaxed, he found me at the kitchen table with 2 IRS agents and a police officer. The look on his face, confusion, realization, and finally, fear, is something I'll never forget. They executed a search warrant, taking his computer, files, and the incriminating ledger I had found. As they led him out in handcuffs, he asked, "How could you do this to me?" I found my voice and replied, "How could you do this to us, to our family, to me?" He had no answer. The legal proceedings were a whirlwind. My husband was charged with multiple counts of tax fraud and money laundering. The evidence against him was overwhelming. The whale-watching tours was just the tip of the iceberg. He had a whole network of fake businesses and offshore accounts. I was questioned extensively, but thankfully cleared of any involvement. Our adult children were devastated, struggling to reconcile the father they knew with the man who committed these crimes. The trial was quick. With a mountain of evidence, my husband's lawyers advised him to plead guilty for a slightly reduced sentence. He was sentenced to 54 months in federal prison and fined $175,000. His girlfriend disappeared as soon as the news broke. Apparently, a boyfriend facing serious jail time wasn't what she had signed up for. Throughout this, I was also dealing with divorce proceedings. My husband's assets were frozen due to the investigation, which complicated things. But the judge was sympathetic to my situation. Given the circumstances and the length of our marriage, I was awarded a significant portion of our marital assets, not tied up in the fraud case. It's strange. For years, I had been financially dependent on my husband. I had given up my career to support his and raise our children. I always thought that without him, I'd be lost. But now, for the first time in decades, I'm financially independent. It's terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. The divorce was finalized last week. 30 years of marriage ended with the stroke of a pen. I thought I would feel sad, but mostly, I just feel relieved. Like I can finally breathe again. I've moved out of our family home, too many memories there. I found a small apartment in a different part of town. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine. I'm slowly furnishing it, choosing each piece myself. It's the first time in my adult life that I've made decisions about my living space without considering anyone else's preferences. I'm also looking for jobs. It's daunting, trying to enter the workforce at my age after being out for so long. But I'm determined. I've enrolled in some online courses to brush up on my skills, and I'm networking as much as I can. It's hard, and there are days when I feel overwhelmed and doubt myself. But then I remember how strong I've had to be these past few months, and I know I can do this too. My relationship with our children is complicated. They understand why I did what I did, but it's still hard for them to reconcile the father they knew with the man who committed these crimes. They're angry at him for his actions, at me for turning him in, at the whole situation. We're in family therapy, trying to work through it all. It's a slow process, but we're making progress. I've had moments of doubt, wondering if I did the right thing, but then I remember the years of lies, The casual cruelty of how he asked for a divorce, how easily he was willing to discard our life together. I think about how he was planning to leave me with nothing while he ran off with his ill-gotten gains and his younger girlfriend. And I know that, as difficult as this has been, it was the right choice. Some people have called me brave. I don't feel brave. Most days, I feel scared and unsure. But I also feel free. Free from the weight of a marriage that had become a sham. Free from the constant anxiety of knowing something was wrong, but not knowing what. Free to figure out who I am outside of being a wife and mother. I'm not going to pretend it's easy. Starting over at 57 is hard. There are nights when I lie awake, terrified about the future. But there are also moments of joy that catch me by surprise. The pride I feel when I master a new skill in my online course. The peace I find in decorating my new apartment exactly how I want it. The laughter I share with new friends I've made in my support group for divorced women. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I'll ever trust enough to be in a relationship again. But I do know that I'm stronger than I ever gave myself credit for. I know that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to demand respect and honesty. To the woman I was 4 months ago, the one who was afraid to rock the boat, who thought she couldn't survive on her own, I wish I could tell her that she's capable of so much more than she knows. That there's life after divorce, even at our age. That the unknown, as scary as it is better than living a lie. So that's where I am now, Reddit. Divorced. Starting a new career. Living alone for the first time in my life. It's not where I thought I'd be at this stage of my life, but I'm here, and I'm doing it. Thank you for listening, for supporting me, for giving me the courage to take control of my life. If my story can help even one person find the strength to leave a bad situation, then sharing it will have been worth it. Here's to new beginnings, no matter when in life they come. Update 2. It's been 2 years since my last update, and I can hardly believe how much has changed. For those new to my story, I discovered my husband's infidelity and tax fraud at 57, leading to his imprisonment and our divorce. Now, I'm living a life I never imagined possible. Thank you all for your support throughout this journey. Your kind words have been a lifeline during my darkest moments. After my last update, I threw myself into job hunting with fierce determination. It wasn't easy. Many employers couldn't see past my age and resume gap. But I refused to give up. My breakthrough came when a small local bank hired me as an administrative assistant in their finance department. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. I worked tirelessly, learning new skills and volunteering for extra projects. My younger colleagues were surprisingly supportive, helping me navigate the modern office environment. Slowly but surely, I began to climb the ladder. Within a year, I was heading my own small team. As my professional confidence grew, so did my personal life. I made new friends, joined a book club, and even started yoga classes. For the first time in decades, I was living life on my own terms. My relationship with my children has improved significantly. We've had many difficult conversations, but we've rebuilt our bonds on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. They've even started to express pride in how I've reinvented myself. Just as I was settling into my new routine, an old friend reached out with an unexpected opportunity. She was launching a startup focused on financial literacy for women going through divorce or sudden life changes. Given my experience, she thought I'd be perfect for their team. At first, I hesitated. The stability of my bank job was comforting. But the more I thought about it, the more excited I became. This was a chance to not only advance my career, but to help women in similar situations. After much deliberation, I took the leap. I'm now the Director of Client Relations at Fresh Start Financial. We're still in the early stages, facing new challenges every day, but it's exhilarating. I'm using my story and hard-earned knowledge to guide other women through tough transitions. This new job meant relocating to Austin, Texas, a city I'd never even visited before. The move was daunting, but incredibly refreshing. There's an energy here that matches my new outlook on life. My new apartment is small but modern, furnished entirely to my taste. It's a far cry from the large, suburban home I shared with my ex-husband, but it feels more like me than any place I've lived before. I've even started dating again, something I never thought I'd do at this stage of life. Nothing serious yet, but it's nice to enjoy companionship without the weight of decades of history and expectation. Now, about my ex-husband. A few weeks ago, I received a letter from him. He was up for parole and wanted to see me. After much deliberation and discussion with my therapist, I decided to visit him. Walking into the prison was surreal. The man I saw bore little resemblance to the person I had married. He looked older, deflated. He apologized, talking about how he'd taken me for granted and regretted throwing away our life together. Part of me wanted to believe him, but a larger part knew better. I listened, acknowledged his apology, and then did something I never thought I'd have the strength to do. I forgave him, not for his sake, but for mine. Carrying around anger and resentment was only holding me back. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or allowing someone back into your life. I made it clear that while I wished him well, our paths had diverged permanently. As I left the prison that day, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was the final step in closing that chapter of my life. This journey hasn't been easy. There have been moments of doubt, nights spent crying, days when I wondered if I'd made the right choice. But those moments have become fewer and farther between. I won't pretend that everything is perfect. Starting over in your late 50s isn't exactly the ideal retirement plan. There are days when I miss the familiarity of my old life, when the loneliness of being single after so many years of marriage hits hard. And watching my children navigate their relationships with their father is an ongoing challenge. But these challenges are mine to face, my story to write. I'm no longer a supporting character in someone else's narrative. I'm the protagonist of my own life, making choices, facing consequences, and growing in ways I never thought possible. To anyone out there in a similar situation, whether you're facing the end of a long marriage, dealing with betrayal, or simply feeling stuck in a life that no longer fits, I want you to know that it's never too late to start over. It's never too late to demand respect, to pursue your dreams, to rewrite your story. Yes, it's scary. Yes, it's hard. But it's also incredibly liberating. There's a whole world out there waiting for you to explore it, and you are capable of so much more than you think. As I look ahead to my 60th birthday, a milestone I once dreaded but now look forward to with excitement, I'm filled with a sense of anticipation. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to find out. I'm learning new things every day, making new friends, exploring new places. I'm building a life that reflects who I am now, not who I was expected to be. So here's to new beginnings, to second acts, to the courage to leap into the unknown. Here's to all of us who have faced adversity and come out stronger on the other side. And here's to the adventures yet to come. Thank you, Reddit, for being a part of my journey. Your support has meant more than you could ever know. I hope that by sharing my story, I've been able to give back even a fraction of what you've given me. Life is full of surprises, some good, some bad. But I've learned that it's not about what happens to you, it's about how you choose to respond. And I choose to respond with hope, with courage, and with an open heart. Here's to the next chapter, whatever it may bring.